Okay, so we're diving into some pretty complex territory today, but I think it's going to blow some
Oh,
minds.
definitely. This is the kind of research that really gets you excited about the future of Alzheimer's research, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. We're talking about synaptic oligomeric tau.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, right?
It is, but it's worth wrapping our heads around because this stuff could be a real game changer. And we've got a fantastic 2023 article from Neuron to guide us.
Fresh off the presses, right? This is cutting edge stuff.
Totally. Okay, so before we get too deep into the nitty-gritty, can you give us a quick crash course on what synaptic oligomeric tau actually is?
Sure. So imagine like the brain as this massive, intricate network, right? And at the heart of this network, you've got billions of neurons.
The brain's communication specialists.
Exactly. They're constantly sending signals to each other. And the way they do this is through these tiny gaps called synapses.
Like little communication hubs.
Precisely. Now, tau, it's a protein, usually hangs out in these neurons and like internal scaffolding, providing support. But sometimes tau can go a bit rogue.
Rogue tau. Not good.
No, not good at all. And when it goes rogue, it can clump together, forming these toxic clumps that we call oligomers.
Okay, so tau is like the scaffolding, and oligomers are like these messed up bits of scaffolding that cause trouble. What makes these oligomers particularly bad news?
Well, we've known for a while that tau tangles, these larger clumps, were bad news for the brain. But these smaller oligomers, they're like mini grenades.
Mini grenade.
Yeah, they disrupt the communication at those crucial synapses. And remember, everything your brain does, every thought, every movement, relies on those messages being sent between neurons.
Right, so these oligomers are basically messing with the brain's ability to function properly.
Exactly. And what has researchers really interested is that these clumps, these synaptic oligomeric tau clumps, might be an early event in the disease process. Maybe even earlier than those tangles start forming.
So we're talking about catching Alzheimer's in its very early stages, potentially even before any symptoms show up.
That's the hope. And this new research we're looking at today, they use some pretty amazing imaging techniques to actually see these oligomers in action.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they find?
They were looking at actual human brain tissue.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. And what they found was, they found these synaptic oligomeric tau clumps even in areas where there weren't a lot of those larger tau tangles.
Hold on. So you're saying these oligomers might be present even before the more obvious signs of Alzheimer's, like those tangles, start to appear?
It's looking that way.
Wow, that changes everything.
It might. And it gets even more interesting. This study found that this oligomeric tau was actually more common than other forms of tau at these synapses. It's like finding the missing piece of the puzzle.
It really makes you wonder why it's more common, though, right? Like, what's going on there?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's what researchers are trying to figure out. Because if this synaptic oligomeric tau is driving the disease in its early stages, then that opens up whole new avenues for treatment. Imagine being able to target and neutralize those mini grenades early on.
Okay, now I'm really getting chills. But before we go there, you mentioned something earlier about tau spreading through the brain. That sounds a little scary.
It is a bit like a domino effect. There's this growing idea that this oligomeric tau can actually move between brain cells, kind of like a virus hijacking healthy cells.
So it's like one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But to understand how it spreads, we need to zoom in even closer, get even more granular. They use this technique, XYZ, to see these tiny tau clumps in incredible detail. It's like
looking at a single grain of sand under a microscope.
Exactly. And what they saw was this uneven distribution of oligomeric tau at the synapses, more on the presynaptic side.
The presynaptic side. Remind me what that is again.
Right, so remember how we talked about synapses being these communication points between brain cells? Well, the presynaptic side, that's like the sender of the message, and the postsynaptic side, that's the receiver.
Okay, got it. So this uneven distribution of tau more on the sending side, could this be evidence that it's literally being passed from one brain cell to another during communication?
That's what the researchers think. This pattern they observed, it suggests that the oligomeric tau might be released from the presynaptic neuron and then, get this, taken up by the postsynaptic neuron, leading to the spread of tau pathology. And, that's where things get really interesting.
We're back, and man, we are right in the thick of it with this whole synaptic oligomeric tau thing. It's like a whole new layer of the Alzheimer's puzzle,
It really is, and it might be the key to finally unlocking some effective treatments.
Okay, so right before the break, You were about to explain what makes this uneven distribution of tau at the synapses so intriguing. You said that's where things get really interesting.
Right. So it's not just that it's uneven, it's what this unevenness suggests.
Okay, I'm all ears. Hit me with it.
Well, it suggests a potential mechanism for how this tau pathology actually spreads through the brain.
Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me. What do you mean by mechanism?
Imagine, right, a single neuron with these toxic tau oligomers hanging out at its synapses is trying to communicate with other neurons.
Okay, I'm imagining it's sending out messages, but those messages are basically laced with these little toxic time bombs.
That's a great way to put it. And the receiving neurons, they're not just getting the message, they might be getting a dose of these toxic oligomers as well.
Oh no. So it's like a chain reaction spreading from neuron to neuron.
Exactly. It's like a domino effect. And as this tau pathology spreads, it disrupts communication networks throughout the brain. Remember how we talked about synapses being crucial for basically everything the brain does?
Right. Every thought, every movement, everything relies on those messages being sent between neurons.
Precisely. So you can see how this potential for synaptic transmission of these toxic oligomers, it's a pretty big deal.
Huge. Because if we can stop it, could that mean actually stopping Alzheimer's in its tracks?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? If we could somehow block these oligomers from being released or even from being taken up by healthy neurons,
we could potentially protect those healthy neurons.
Right, and prevent the spread of the disease. That's why this research is so groundbreaking. It's not just identifying a new target for treatment, it's opening up entirely new avenues for research.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What are the next steps?
Well, for one, we need to confirm these findings in living brains. This study, it was conducted on postmortem brain tissue.
So we're looking at a snapshot in time.
Exactly. Incredibly valuable, but still just a snapshot. To really understand this process, we need to see it happening in real time.
Like switching from still photography to high-definition video.
Perfect analogy. And the good news is there are some incredible imaging techniques being developed that might allow us to do just that. Imagine being able to track the movement of these tau oligomers in the living brain.
That would be incredible. We could actually see how they're spreading and how they're impacting brain function.
And that's not all. Researchers are already exploring all sorts of potential therapeutic strategies based on these findings.
Like what? Give me some hope here.
Well, some researchers are developing drugs that could potentially bind to and neutralize those toxic oligomers.
So kind of like sending in a specialized cleanup crew to deal with those mini grenades.
Precisely. And others are looking at ways to boost the brain's natural defenses, make it harder for those oligomers to do their damage in the first place.
Okay, so we're talking about disarming the mini grenades and building stronger walls. I like it.
Exactly. It's a multi-pronged approach. Of course, it's important to acknowledge that there are still limitations to this study.
Right. You mentioned it was done on postmortem brain tissue. Anything else?
Well, it's just one study. And more research is always needed to confirm findings and really dig into the complexities of this process.
So it's like we've opened a door to this whole new room, but we haven't had a chance to fully explore it yet.
A perfect analogy. And that's science for you. It's a constantly evolving process of discovery. Each new finding leads to more questions, more avenues to explore.
And hopefully more answers. All right, so we've journeyed deep into the brain today, explored some seriously cutting-edge research. But before we wrap things up, let's do a quick recap for anyone who just tuned in or for those of us who might need a little refresher.
Sounds like a plan. Synaptic oligomeric tau, what we need to remember is, well, it's not just a mouthful, right?
Definitely not.
These tiny clumps of tau, they pack a serious punch, even more so than those larger tau tangles we've known about for years. And what they're doing at those synapses, those communication hubs between neurons.
They're like little troublemakers, disrupting those vital communication lines.
Exactly. And the really concerning thing is these oligomers, they might be spreading through the brain like
a virus.
Right. Jumping from neuron to neuron, leaving a trail of dysfunction in their wake.
And what really has researchers excited, I think, is that these synaptic oligomeric tau clumps, they could be showing up early, even before any of those classic Alzheimer's symptoms rear their ugly heads.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that early detection, that's key. Because if we can target these oligomers early on, neutralize them before they wreak too much havoc,
we could potentially slow down, maybe even stop the progression of the disease.
That's the hope. Now, of course, more research is always needed, always more to uncover.
Always. Science is a journey, never a destination.
You got it. But the potential here, it's undeniable. We're talking about potentially rewriting the future of Alzheimer's disease.
And that's a future I'm definitely excited about. A future where memories are cherished, where minds stay sharp well into our golden years.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the amazing world of, yes, you guessed it, synaptic oligomeric tau. We covered a lot of ground today, explored some seriously complex science. But hopefully you're walking away with a sense of hope, a sense of possibility. Because with each new discovery, we inch closer to unlocking the mysteries of the brain and conquering diseases like Alzheimer's.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more we know, the better equipped we are to fight back.
So keep those brains buzzing, folks. Stay curious. And join us next time for another fascinating deep dive into the world of science and discovery. Until then, take care of those amazing brains.